The most official, unofficial Sage podcast in the world. Every episode, we bring together Sage insiders, industry leaders, and global voices. Half of them deep into the Sage ecosystem, half of them bringing a perspective from well outside it, for honest conversations about accounting, finance, and technology that you won't find anywhere else. I'm Matt Lesko.
I'm Doug Lewis.
And I'm Emily Maudair.
Let's dive in. All right, now we're actually to it. So I'm going to read this. All right, Ellen, I know you're probably going to hate it just sitting there listening to it, but I have to do it because it's actually much more impressive than most of the other bozos we have on here. So our guest today, Ellen Choi. Ellen is the CEO and founder of Edgefield Group, a consultancy that supports CPA firms with AI onboarding and enablement to drive growth and improve efficiency. She was named one of Accounting Today's top 2025 most 100 influential people in accounting and a 2025 most powerful woman in accounting by CPA Practice Advisor, which is daunting just reading this. She advises the profession as part of the AICPA Engage Tech Plus Planning Committee and CPA.com Digital CPA Advisory Committee. As a guest and contributor for Accounting Today and through regular speaking and moderating at leading alliances and association events. Her past includes co-founding Awin, a technology company that helps 800 plus accounting firms digitize and automate their practice management and tax workflows. At Awin, she held roles of Chief Product Officer, COO, and Chief Innovation Officer for a 4+ year period. She's a Stanford engineering alumna and a Harvard MBA. It's just getting more and more impressive as I go here. Who began her career at Google, of all places, automating finance processes and improving business performance. Seeing how outdated tools slow down back office teams shaped her interest in building modern, enterprise-grade technology. Ellen, welcome. I'm intimidated just from reading that. So
yeah, it sounds like you need to take a sip of water.
That is an impressive background. Welcome, Ellen. I'm really excited to have you here today, an actual expert in the room here. And to kick things off, I got to know, since you're such an expert and you have this amazing pedigree behind you, how do you just flip the switch and just like turn the brain off for a minute?
Yeah, it's hard, especially in today's society, right? I think all of us face this. We just have notifications, our smartphones. So one of my favorite activities is to actually meditate, like silent meditation. I've been on multi-day meditation retreats where there was no phone, no internet. You couldn't actually even speak with other people just because, that sort of solitude and blocking out all the noise. And AI can be actually quite overwhelming. It helps me to be more grounded so I can show up as a better person that can actually help others.
I have to ask, how often do you do that?
So I meditate every day, and I try to do a multi-day meditation at least once a year, and this is like 3 to 5 days. That's not easy as a founder, CEO of a AI consulting firm, today, because things are changing quickly. So that needs to happen like during holidays or when things are a little bit slow. I've actually found that the first half of April and the first half of October are great times to take vacations.
I wonder why that would be.
I plan my life around tax deadlines at this point.
So last question on that. When you go on these multi-day retreats, is this something you do completely by yourself, or are these like led by a group or organized by a group?
Yeah, so I've done Vipassana retreats, which are retreat centers all over the world, and it is organized and, it has a specific lineage associated. I've also done solo retreats that I just created DIY on my own at an Airbnb in a remote, mountain where I'm just kind of imposing this discipline on my own. So different experiences, but similar outcomes in the sense that it does bring me a lot of clarity, and just kind of being able to block out the noise helps me in terms of being more strategic.
No, very, very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Very, very cool.
I think I would go crazy if I tried that. I really do. It's so impressive. I find that people can meditate, effectively is just amazing to me. I feel like I would just sit there and just go nuts after like 60 seconds. Can't do it. But it's really impressive that you can.
I think this is why this is going to be your next challenge. I think you've just named it, here publicly for everybody. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I'll make sure I update everybody on my meditation That's what they want to hear from me. Absolutely. Ellen, so, we're talking about artificial intelligence in the accounting world, all this fun stuff. Just to give people a little more background, because your background that I read wasn't impressive enough. How many firms do you say that you work with on some level here?
Oh, I mean, I worked with, double digits of firms, and we usually focus on mid-market to enterprise firms. So I would say, 10 people ish and above. Although, of course, we're offering some new services this year that is going to be accessible for smaller firms as well. But on the bigger side, yeah. So, I am really fortunate to have a lot of firm leaders that I knew from my Awin days, and I work with a lot more informally, in terms of the network and advice and sharing all of that. So it's been a great experience.
Do you work with firms all across the United States, or are you centralized somewhere?
Yeah, so all over US, and actually we also work with we have a client in Canada that's active right now. So now I can say we work all over North America.
Awesome. And what I was going to ask had to do with the fact that you said as firms at 10 people. And I think that maybe some firms at that size would think maybe it's not approachable for me. Maybe this level of consulting and support is too expensive for me. And so I I just like to hear a little bit up from that perspective, not necessarily from a commercial, but sort of like how approachable is this type of advisory services for the advisors?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's maybe some irony here. It's like a very meta. We're advising the advisors. You may be surprised at how it's less correlated with size, and it's much more correlated with the leadership, the managing partners, like will and determination to change, and profitability, right? Because a 10 people CPA firm that is very profitable, has a really great niche, and is really looking to level up their AI efforts. That firm might actually, I've had deals like that go through much quicker than bigger firms with more budget. But there's a partnership, and I think you guys have all probably seen this. If you know CPA firms, you know what I'm talking about. They're paralyzed, or they can't really come to a decision to have this type of advisory service. And
No?
at the end of the day, we meet firms wherever they are, and we offer holistic support, including training, right? And training is very approachable for everyone, accountants and advisors. That's something that they're used to doing every single year with CPE. And so it's a very like well-known heuristic that we plug into for firms that are even, sole props all the way to thousands of people.
Amazing. Thank you.
And do you find that when you approach these firms that like what's the percentage of them like actually excited and wanting to embrace AI? Because sometimes, when you think of accounting firms, you think of, you know, the stereotypical kind of stuffy, not wanting to change. But I think that's changing.
Yeah. So I would say that we've been all on this. I divide the AI times into pre ChatGPT and post ChatGPT, right? I mean, we've been talking about AI, for a long time, but really like post ChatGPT and OpenAI, that's when things really took off in terms of the progression of the interest and adoption, and how AI is actually integrated into our work. So we've seen kind of the step every single year in terms of more accountants understanding this is a way of the future. They experiment on it in their personal lives, and they understand the impact and the potential on the work front. So a lot of experimentation. And it's very uneven in the sense that you have people that are very curious and innovative, all the way down to people that you have to kick out, that are kicking and screaming, and you have to kind of drag along in terms of going into the new age. Like firms have people of all spectrum. So we see this all the time, right? But what I will say is, last year there was a lot of firms, at least pockets of people, in experimentation mode, much more, hey, let's just get some, Copilot license and just kind of see, how this thing works. let's actually like try this other vendor. Let's actually test some pilots. What I'm seeing this year is a conversation shifting yet again to really firms understanding that AI, it's no longer optional. Like, if you want to thrive and succeed and survive into the future, adopting AI, that's imperative. And the conversation is actually even shifting from are you using AI to how are you using AI, right? Because, people are understanding. I mean, there's a massive difference between using Copilot for summarizing documents and using Copilot to do some valuation analysis that used to take 2 days and you collapse it into 2 hours, right? Like people are trying to understand there's actually much more depth of how you use AI. So like where I'm starting to see the field kind of separate again, from that perspective. And the firms that really get it, like they're the ones that are making that systematic progress and they are excited. Of course, there's a lot of security, data, compliance concerns that always happen, and there should be. These are, really big problems, but they're all solvable problems. So, even the accountants who are forging ahead and who are not necessarily the most forward in terms of because of all these issues, they understand that there are solutions out there, and the best way to just kind of get going is to figure out the guardrails and understand what can be done within those parameters. So yeah, it's actually really exciting.
Do you see, like, is there some kind of common event that really forces these accounting firms to actually pay attention to this more? Like, yeah, changing of like management, changing of leadership. I don't know. They lose some staff or they lose big clients. Is there anything that kind of drives these firms and just a light bulb goes off, or is it just all over the board, mixed bag?
Yeah, there are sometimes when like major, like really major product announcements come out. As you all know, Claude is very buzzy this year, right? Like, it's like Claude, Claude, Claude. And part of it is because Claude Cowork, it's kind of the mass market, agentic AI technology that's actually accessible and generating kind of that exponential value beyond just a chat interface. So when that came out and, we started to see accountants actually use it, write about it, talk about it, like, that was a light bulb moment for many people, right? So you'll have some of these really major tentpole announcements that trigger like a greater interest or adoption or curiosity. And then the other thing, honestly, it's just seasonality, right? So, accountants were just really heads down until end of April. And then I think at that point, everyone just kind of poked their heads up and it's like, oh, the world like shifted again, right? Like, so, it's kind of like you go through these step function inflection points of seasonality. And then, people kind of see the before and after. And, there are big changes. And that's a trigger for people to, learn, study, talk to their peers, go to events, and figure out what the next step should be.
And that next step, because every conference, every webinar, everyone you talk to, everyone's talking about AI, and I feel like so much is it's like 100,000 feet up in the air right now, like just very high level stuff. So, what are you seeing firms actually implement in terms of AI? Because I think we're kind of in like the infancy crawling stage still of really doing it. So talking about it and implementing are two very different things. What's kind of the most common way firms really start implementing any type of legitimate AI tools into the practice?
Yeah, so there are kind of couple ways firms think about implementing AI. One is kind of like the horizontal AI tool layer, which is Copilot is definitely the most obvious and probably most well adopted beyond the free version that comes bundle, the actual premium licenses. But you also have ChatGPT, you have Claude, right? These like horizontal AI tools that every single person at the firm can pick up and use and get value out of. So that's like one vector. Like, we really start to see firms invest in this last year, more firms investing in it this year. And then the other kind of
Are
way
you
people
saying, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are you saying that you're seeing more firms utilizing Copilot than the other two? Is it more, is that seems to be closer to them because they're all in Office 365, or I thought I heard something like that.
Yes. What I meant was actually as a category, firms are
Okay.
picking and adopting, them firm wide, right? But like between all the tools, Generally, the bigger the firm, the more likely they're going to adopt Copilot, the paid version of Copilot, as the firm-wide tool of choice. And then you'll have pockets of people that have different tools like, Perplexity or Claude or, ChatGPT, whatever it may be. Smaller firms, a little bit of a different story, right? Many of them do actually go straight and adopt Claude, enterprise or chat enterprise, because those are actually the enterprise tiers are relatively low. It's actually quite accessible for teams of even 20 people or, 30, 40, 50 people. So, we're definitely seeing that for sure. So it really depends on the segment that, you're talking about on that front. And then the second way is really the vendors, right? Like, firms think of adopting AI in terms of I adopted BlueJay, right? Like that's the way that I am moving forward in terms of AI enablement adoption. I'm testing, these tools and pilots. And as you all know, there is abundance of, tech vendors that are, AI native, AI powered right now. So there is no shortage
Really?
of
I'm
offer.
not getting any emails or calls or anything about that.
You
I
clearly make it down to the exhibit floor
Nothing
at,
on LinkedIn.
at AICPA Engage, which was just the most number of AI tech vendors. I think we actually have a profession has probably seen in like forever. That's my guess. Exactly right. So firms also think of adopting AI in that way. What's the tool that I'm adopting? What's the AI feature? So we're seeing firms make progress on that front too.
So, one of the things that I think about in this question is there are so many people that are talking about AI, especially in the accounting space. I almost feel like it's too much. How do you know who's giving good information versus bad information? How do you disseminate between the different talk paths that are happening today? And sometimes I'm asked to talk about it, and I'll say straight up, like I think my knowledge is very minuscule to what you really need to know in order to make these decisions. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think what's happening is, and this actually is a premise of my starting Edgefield Group. Well, when I was a full-time executive at Iwin, and currently I'm an advisor, so I help on an advisory basis. But as a full-time executive, what I saw was so many people talking about AI to accountants. Exactly, to your point, Matthew. A lot of people talking about strategy, right? Whatever that means different things. But nobody was like there just weren't very many people or firms that were helping them actually understand like how do you get value out of AI, right? Like how do you actually get employees to use it every day and save time and go over the fear hump, be secure and compliant, like really those practical playbook, the devil's in the details, dynamics. So that's the reason I started Edgefield Group, because I just saw this really massive need to support firms in that last mile of AI enablement. So to your point, Matthew, like definitely a lot of people talking about AI. To me, a lot of the talk tracks are pretty similar actually at this point. Everyone's kind of saying the same thing in terms of what you need to do. So for example, I think we all know that time and materials is especially vulnerable to AI disruption. So everyone, the recommendation is move to value-based billing. Okay, great. How? Like, what do you actually do? What's the first step? Second, like, no one's talking about that piece of it. So, that's really where we focus, because we think that, I mean, that's where they're actually going to get real value out of AI and all of these things. So I think in general, like looking for speakers or leaders who actually have very concrete, practical tips or playbooks or, step by step ways to actually approach a problem. I think that's the thing that accountants can look for when they're looking for help or support in terms of moving forward in their AI initiatives.
And just to double down on this for 1 second, if you're on LinkedIn, when I go on LinkedIn, I see everybody's like, use this prompt to get this done, or I'm providing as a solopreneur, I'm providing AI advisory services. How many, I guess maybe my question is, how many firms have you worked with that kind of work with that level of people and just it didn't go well, or you came in and said, hey, there's actually a different approach to this? Because my fear when I see that, and I don't want to speak for anybody that's out there, but my fear is like we have all these people that are toting this expertise, and it makes me think or question the true expertise that's out there.
Yeah, I think it depends on kind of like what kind of expertise we believe is the most helpful for, the clients, which in this case are accountants and accounting firms. And, I think a lot of those types of messages that I see, it's not valuable. It's a extremely like specific like slice of how AI becomes successful, within a firm, or how accountants can succeed. It's very important to understand like specific prompts and how something can give value. But if you don't have a great AI policy, if you don't have the guardrails, if you haven't like taught your people the basics of how AI works, like that's just kind of like solving a kind of a random problem in a very haphazard way, as opposed to approaching it in a much more systematic way of firm-wide enablement. So from our perspective, the work that we do is very holistic, because really, and you guys have all seen this as well, AI touches everything, right? You cannot it's not This is not just a technology problem. It really disrupts many different parts of the business, the firm, the people, the culture management, the pricing model, the growth model, your technology stack. So you kind of have to look at it holistically from the perspective of how do we make the group of accountants, the firm, the team, like how do we make them successful, as opposed to just equipping one person with one, optimized prompt.
Makes
So
a lot of
Ellen,
sense.
I gotta. What's the three worst vendors out? No, no. um, when you start.
Sure, later I'll tell you, but yes.
Yes, yes. Well, over a drink, you can tell me all the horrible ones, and I'm sure there's more than three. But when you start actually working with the firm on that kind of that last mile, the actual implementation component of this whole thing, i- is there like a standard playbook there, or is it pretty firm by firm? Is it unique? What does it actually look like? Do you have like here's a package? Here we go.
Yeah, I do. We have a package. It's called AI Foundations. We designed it literally for this purpose. And it's the whole point, coming back to, it's very interdisciplinary. We do AI governance, and we do AI training for everybody. And we also do a AI ready tech stack audit, right? So then like we're really looking at all parts of the business from an AI angle perspective. This is like for firms that are earlier in their really like AI readiness journey. And there are still many firms
When
like
when you say earlier, like what do you mean? Like maybe they're just using like a chat GPT to answer some prompts, like, or they're not using anything at all.
usually there are people inside using it. It's just not coordinated, right? Maybe like some
Mm.
people have Copilot licenses. Maybe one person has Claude, and they're using the free version to do some research. Maybe somebody's done some research on a vendor. Maybe there's an upgrade, for Thomson Reuters or CCH. That's like AI driven. So it's a very like scattershot way of looking at things, and there isn't real forward momentum or progress.
Mhm.
So, from that perspective, firms that have done that work of coordinated progress, like I am starting to see more of a spread, this year. So this year, for kind of this season's talk track, I actually ran what I call the AI game, which is a 20-point AI maturity assessment scorecard. So, I had people in the room that gave themselves points if they met all these specific criteria across foundation, transformation, or integration and transformation, like three different phases of AI maturity transformation. And what I like fairly consistently, the average across the board is, I would say maybe about 40% of the participants were in that 0 to 5 point category, that beginner category, right? Like 40% ish. And then another 30% in the second bucket of like, 6 to 10, right? So like they've made some progress, but still early. And then, the rest, maybe 20 to 30% in the second half. So what this tells me is that there are still a lot of firms at the beginning of the journey, that's 0 to 5, but that's like actually 40%. The majority are like have done some work and have made some progress, and some are actually quite advanced. So there's just kind of this bigger spread that is emerging this year, and it's only going to the spread is only going to grow bigger, right? Because firms that are really locked in, they're going to be making more and more progress as opposed to firms that aren't really doing anything coordinated systematically from a firm-wide basis. They're going to be standing still, and in 12 to 18 months we're going to see the difference, and it's going to be hard for firms to catch up at that point, because as you know, it's not just about throwing money. Like, these things take time, willpower, like people, change management. So for firms next year that are still in the 0 to 5 category, I think that's going to be a shrinking category of firms, and firms this year should be working on that.
I have to ask, is there a possibility there's a slight bias that the people that you're polling in this would be more likely to be using AI because they're in the room talking to you, and therefore that there's a possibility that there's a wider percentage of firms that would fall into that 0 to 5 bucket? Is there a possibility of that?
I think maybe for a couple of the sessions, yeah, like yes, as in, when I spoke at AICP Engage, they can self-select themselves into attending my session, right? But other ones are, it might be an alliance AI keynote where like every member, for everyone is in the room, as part of the keynote, right? So it's not that, they're opting in per se. It's much more that like this group of people, which definitely has like the spread of AI maturity. They're all sitting in the room, and I'm running this game and it's a simulation. So yes and no, but I think I ran this multiple times to see a pattern here.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning the data that you have. I think whenever I have a small experience in the polling world, and I think that even firms that are probably attending these conferences are more forward-looking firms. And I think the only thing that I wanted to potentially get across is I think there's a wider or a larger percentage of firms that need to be listening to this right now, listening to what you're talking about, and really think about how they're going to invest and stay ahead. That's just my hypothesis.
Upgrade.
On the investment thing, I want to get into kind of like human control in a minute here, but on the investment component you just brought up there, Matt. Ellen, I got to know, because I don't know, like everybody, I get 50 to 100 just cold emails a day. Just most of it's just slough that is clearly generated by AI. But I always love the claims that's like, my AI enabled workflow system will 10x your revenue in 3 months or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
obviously you can spot the ridiculous ones like that. Anyone can, but how should firms be looking at some of the ROI claims that these vendors are pushing on them right now?
Yeah, it's a very noisy time right now. As you know, there's a lot of marketing hype, from everybody, and it's not always. Some are more true than others, as you know.
Name names. Name name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was interesting. I was having this conversation on ROI, with a group of firm leaders at one of these conferences that I was speaking at, and so ROI, return on investment, right? So then like let's look at like every single component of that. Let's start with actually the investment piece. Like, what are you actually investing? And I think I think one of the topics that you and I had discussed was this idea of like, oh, what should firms, budget, like, for all this AI stuff. And I was like, wow, what a cute idea that you think firms actually have a budget for AI and technology, right? As you know, they don't, right? Like, they don't have any budget. Like, usually it's like the partnership going in or the managing partner saying, we have to do this, and we're just gonna spend the money, whatever it is. So, there's this, it's the investment piece. Firms haven't really professionalized what that is, what that means, like what's and nobody likes taking cost, out of the comp, right? Partner comp. And, what does that actually mean? And then the other thing on the investment piece is, usually people think of investment so far in technology as just like the technology licensing cost. But with AI, it's very different, in the sense that it's unfortunately going to be probably higher than what you want it to be or expect it to be based on your prior sort of investments into technology, because there's so much more in terms of like people enablement, setting up governance layers. Like there's a lot of hidden cost of having AI really be successful and working well within a firm. So really the investment piece, like, thinking through it very holistically, right? Understanding investment isn't just a technology license. It's actually like, upscaling our people. It's swapping out certain parts of, our technology stack, not just the AI piece. So that's the I of the ROI. So then let's look at the return. So the return piece is also, it can be quite tricky as well, right? So one of the I think the most obvious benefit of AI is that it helps accountants save time. Like that's obvious, right? Like it's like a very like productivity, driven narrative. And that's great. But what we tell our clients when we go in and we do all this AI training and enablement is that I'm very confident that we will save, your people time. Actually, a lot of it, what I don't have control over is if your people are spending time scrolling TikTok or they're doing revenue generative work, right? So there's a lot more work that needs to be done to realize the return piece of this ROI, which is, are they working on strategic projects? Do you have cross-sell pipelines? Do you have new clients that are ready to go? Do you have new advisory services, that you can be offering? What does that transition look like? There's probably more cost in setting all of those things up to generate those revenues. So actually saving time is really like quite easy and straightforward. Monetizing that's really, really hard. And a lot of firms, we're still in the early innings of really figuring out what that looks like for us, right? So the return piece is very, very tricky, indirect right now as well. And then the other thing about the return piece is there's so much qualitative component to this right now. Doug, to your point, like still being in early innings, right? As much as we wish that things were more baked and more certain, as it is, it's just not. Technology, AI is just changing on us like really every day, right? So some of this is just kind of the return is actually you're investing into this future benefit and upside that you can't really quite measure today, right? But you have to keep up, otherwise you're going to fall behind. So I think a lot of accounting firms and leaders, they sometimes struggle with that because we're numbers people, right? We want things black and white. We want to like tie things out, and you just can't, like, so I think that the firms that have been the most successful are the ones who really understand this at the leadership level, and they're able to make decisions understanding that it's a little bit of a leap into the unknown, but that is a business decision. That's the job of a leader, to really like see around the corner and be strategic and understand like the competitive dynamics here as well going into the future.
One of the things that I saw on your website, because yes, I do a little research before I get on these calls, was, and I might get it slightly wrong, so please correct me.
You
is-
probably will. Yep,
Is
go
that
ahead.
one of the missions or the goals of your consulting firm is to give team members back 20 minutes a day, I think is what it said.
Minimum, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that was I felt that was a really easy to comprehend, not something that you question its credibility. It
It's like
seems attainable.
outrageous. Like, yeah, you get 6
Yeah.
hours a day back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it felt like something that was attainable. Can you tell me like where that came from, what the why behind that? So if I'm coming to you as a customer, why is that the goal that you set aside, and just talk me through that?
Yeah. So, fun fact, we're in the middle of a massive redesigning of our website. So this usually happens, every 6 to 12 months, because AI is changing so quickly. The services that we actually offer, the value prop, the benefits actually change as well. So, that I think that is rooted exactly, Matthew. Like I think you hit the nail on the head, which is, you gotta meet people wherever they are, and it needs to feel attainable, right? It needs to feel approachable. It's not like a completely, outrageous, pie in the sky, like saving 6 hours a day with this, sales funnel to like the emails that Doug is getting. So, that was really the genesis. And like, we knew that from all the work that we've done with firms, saving minimum of 20 minutes on average a day was just table stakes. Like we could absolutely do that with, all the use cases and the really specific workflow applications that we, have really designed and created and generated for teaching purposes for our firms. So that was really sort of the genesis. And I think up until this year, the conversation around the benefit of AI has been around productivity and time savings. So we wanted to really speak directly into that because we don't need to convince people of that. Like they kind of already know that, AI will make them more productive. The question is exactly how, and what's the benefit. This year, I do see the conversation broadening out from benefits of AI from just productivity to much broader, like client experience, revenue expansion, market expansion. And this is happening because our accountants, like our customers and clients, like their clients are coming to them, right? Like they're trying to have these conversations with their clients, as trusted advisors. So I think we are at a period this year, kind of a real sort of inflection point of, what, we need to look at AI much broader than productivity savings, which is what's on the website. And so one of the things that, we're really updating is to really showcase the value of our work, beyond just a specific like time metrics, which is very concrete, which is it's a starting point. But there's so much more.
So, I got an email today where we're trying to win some work, and the client is specifically asking, how do we use AI within our firm? So I think it's growing to even more than what you said by winning work, new work. Because if you're
Agreed.
not using AI, yeah. Anyway, that was an interesting, very timely to this conversation.
Yeah, and going back to that question, Emily, where I was going to go is I wanted, Ellen, your opinion on. I'm not picking on CLA. So Emily works for CLA, and they just announced that they were going to invest $500 million in AI and technology, 25% of their annual revenue. I don't know if they give a time frame. I'm sure they're not going to spend $500 million in 1 year over it. But what does that tell you about where the industry is going from an AI investment perspective, and sort of some of the things that you said earlier in this conversation?
Yeah, we've seen these announcements in the last, I think 18 months, right? Like the big four certainly have not been quiet on this front at all. I think we've seen all sorts of announcements, PwC saying like they're using 200, tax agents, and, they are investing billions, right? All of them have, said, they're investing billions, in the top 10 like CLAs of the world, RSM, BDO, they all have press releases that talk about hundreds of millions to billions that they're investing into AI, and for what purpose. So definitely we've seen this, and what we've seen is that yes, like many of these firms, they are investing that money into quote unquote AI, but like the definition of AI is broader than that, in the sense that you need to modernize all your data infrastructure if you actually really want your AI to be the most effective, right? Like that amount is getting lumped into the billions in investment, which is probably work that they would have done anyway, like in terms of their technology budget, right? So some of this is absolutely, it is like very necessary for AI, but it is also kind of what would have been more traditional, technology budget. Now that's getting all lumped in because it's an arms race, and, people read headlines, and it's like, oh, if they are saying they invested hundreds of millions, and we need to put out a press release and talk about this, and, and it's all effectively they're doing it already. And they are spending more on AI, obviously, like AI agents, cleanup work, development shops, things like that, AI engineers, AI teams. But I like, from our perspective, what we see is those headline numbers are not as great of a leap, as one may believe, if you kind of look at what's happening in the background.
I'll tell you one of the concerns I have, and I love your comment on, which is a little bit outside of this conversation, is some of the things that we're hearing right now about how pricing of technology, like hardware, is going up. Like the iPhone's going to go up by $200 a pop.
Right.
Laptops are going to go up by $500. That the API usage fees are going up, and it feels like as much as we may save on productivity, that the access to and ability to invest is going to start to shift and only be available to some of the largest organizations. And it concerns me because I always thought AI as, that evener, that
Yeah.
it created a more even playing field for the business community. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think cost is definitely one of the biggest storylines this year specifically, right? Like AI costs, because we have now like some real AI consumption token costs, that are getting added back to our bills. And part of the reason is because the models are getting more sophisticated. They are just more, energy and consumption hungry, and these companies can only pass down their the savings for so long to us from a market share grab perspective, right? Like the money they raised from VCs and such. So you're kind of starting to see kind of all the impact of that. So absolutely, one of the things that, so we have a Claude foundations, for accountants that we teach. And one of the things that we bring up, relatively early on is token optimization or usage optimization,
Mhm.
right? Like, how do you actually efficiently use different types of models for the right type of tasks? Because you don't need to use the most advanced model to ask, what day is Easter going to be next year, right? Like, you don't need, right? Like, so it's like, so it's some of it is education in terms of how do you actually most efficiently optimize for cost and using these models so that you're really doing the 80/20 and the costs don't, get out of control, so that it is accessible to smaller firms who don't have those really large budgets. But what I will say, like even the enterprises, like their budgets are going out of hand, so they're imposing all these best practices and caps and things like that as well to their employees, right? So really we're getting to a world where you're looking at human budget and AI budget, like almost like in a very like label, fungible way, right? So the most productive humans will get the greatest amount of like AI budget to be, actually like wheel that. So really like looking at it from a performance management perspective. And then the last thing I will say is I think this is why actually the open source models are really interesting. And I keep joking with one of our clients that we're just gonna set him up with a bunch of Mac Minis and put agents on it, source models, because I actually do think that that is a really interesting, very cost-effective, viable way for smaller firms and probably bigger firms too, right? Everybody, from like a AI cost and productivity and features like management dynamic perspective. I have a whole article in my head that I'm going to write. I'm going to call it on-prem 2.0. It's going to be like a
I was just gonna say. I mean, I think what you're saying for anybody that's not picking up on is like there's an opportunity to repurpose some of your old infrastructure that's now not cloud based, that server based infrastructure to self deploy open source AI to automate certain more of the basic tasks and not utilize the cost of tokens. Is that the correct way of putting that?
Yes, but I want to be extremely careful that people don't take away the message that they don't have to move from on-prem, because that is absolutely not the case. Uh, so don't misquote me on this. It's going to be like a whole different type of local server optimization. I don't even know if those server equipments would actually work really well or properly, right, for this purpose as well, right?
Okay.
So it's like a very different way of looking. Yes, but it is like I think for a long time we've been hitting people over the head with go to the cloud and be cloud based and all of that. And I do find it a little bit ironic that now some of the, if you look at the cutting edge people in Silicon Valley and what they're doing, and I've been experimenting on this as well, like just even with the old laptop or buying a Mac Mini, right? It's like this like it's actually extremely like cost effective way to have very advanced technologies like at your fingertips.
Okay, that's very interesting.
So if I'm picking this up correctly, which, there's a 50-50 chance I'm not, it gets pretty complex pretty quick to actually sift through all the AI, implement it properly, keep it up, all this fun stuff. Not only just the cost, but the people, the change management side of things. So
the governance.
the governance, the stuff that you just don't see on the tag of the license. I am not a Marvel fan. Okay. And the reason I'm not a Marvel fan is there's too many movies, there's too many TV shows, prequels, sequels, offshoots. I don't know where to start anymore. So is that kind of similar to AI? I'm thinking a firm who hasn't done anything yet, like I got options, I got vendors, some are great, some are bad. I don't know what to start with. What would be the recommendation for you for a firm who's done absolutely nothing yet in terms of implementing AI? Where would you start? What would be that first piece?
And before you answer this, Ellen, obviously Doug doesn't use AI, because if you just went to AI and asked what the best way to watch all of the Marvel content, and whether you want it in chronological order or if you want it in release date, you would know how to approach it.
But in
True, you
Doug's
can ask-
defense, it did start getting bad. They started getting bad.
I don't know.
Uh,
I'm not legally allowed to use AI. Let's put it that way. It's part of it's for my probate, but don't worry about it. Go ahead, Alan. It's day one, step one. What are you doing? Where can I sort through something?
Okay, yeah. Start using Copilot for the whole firm, the paid license, and train your people like on kind of like each specific tool, especially the Excel piece of it. Because that's where accountants spend most of the time. Like literally, like if you've done nothing and this is like the first step. And then in parallel, create an AI policy. Almost all firms have some sort of AI policy today. The question is, when has that been updated, and do employees actually know about it, right? So then that's really what you want to optimize for here, which is updated for today, should include, agentic AI technologies. We usually recommend for our clients, have your people sign it like once a year, so that it's a very active like participation of, I have read this policy. And I mean, I'm like, quite honestly, it's changing so quickly. So you could even argue for 6 months, but most firms actually do have like an annual, right, policy updating training cadence. So, that's a good time for that, right? So, update your policy, have people actually read it, understand what it means, including all the data classification tiers. And then that's a really good starting point for firms that are at the very beginning.
And who inside firms should be kind of owning the artificial intelligence, layout, rollout, whatever you want to call it? Is it always the managing partner or C-suite, or do you find it's best to go with an outside hire, use a group like yourself, which I'm sure is option number one? Who should be really running this thing? Because, I work with a lot of firms too, and oftentimes the managing partner, CEO might be a smart individual. However, they're clueless about a certain aspect of running the firm.
Yeah, so what I will say is the will and the desire for the transformation needs to come from the very top. It needs to come from the managing partner. The conviction needs to come from, the COO, the, partnership, whatever it may be. So that is literally the biggest success criteria of whether any sort of AI initiative succeeds or fails, right? And then below that, then you have the actual like execution, which should not be owned by that group of people, right? Like AI execution, decision making. We see like AI committees, which are good for like collecting feedback and getting sort of like bottoms up input, and then having a really clear decision making trail from that on the execution side, and that usually tends to be the COO or the CIO or like the head of AI, which usually ends up being like a tax or audit partner who's really likes Claude, and all of a sudden they become like the head of AI, whatever it may be, right? Like, there needs to be some really clear sort of like step ladder for AI decision execution. So, that's a model that we've seen work well.
It's interesting. It doesn't sound like there's like here's the best way to do it. It's kind of like figure it out for your firm, which is tough.
It's a little bit different because of the firm, right? It really depends on the firm, depends on the dynamics of the leadership dynamic, who owns what. And, because partnership structure isn't necessarily, it could have different levels of corporate, sort of like leanings. Like, that's where we go in and we have to really take a look and be able to say, this is sort of what we think makes the most sense for you.
Love it. And kind of last piece I want to hit on, because we've stolen too much of your time. I've been very, very nice about this whole thing. When we look at artificial intelligence rolling out in the accounting world specifically, a lot of it is very transactional focused, back office, productivity focused, like we kind of been talking about, the easier repetitive tasks. How are you seeing, the best in class firms implement some of these tools while also keeping a human connection with the clients and honestly internally with the other staff? You know what I mean? Is there like a good way to kind of blend this all together to roll it out where you don't lose that one-on-one relationship, whether it's, internally with your team, your staff, your partner group, or externally with your client base?
Yeah, we always emphasize like first of all, Copilot is called Copilot because, you still own you're accountable for the end product, So I think you start out with the human accountability of anything that's generated from AI. So that's one layer in terms of clients. We actually believe AI helps accountants be more client centric, be more trusted advisor. Like, because think about how much of the time is spent on manual work. If you can actually eliminate some of that manual work, that 20 minutes on average saved per day, like what if you put that back into talking to your clients, like really understanding their needs and actually like, thinking more deeply about kind of like their, emails and responses, things like that. So like all of that time actually is extremely additive and directly helpful for having a more client and human centric relationship.
It makes sense. And I'm sure it's just that easy to implement, just to keep that, right? Just that easy. All you
Exactly.
need is that 10-second snippet there. Ellen, I really appreciate your time here. Would love to hear your kind of closing thought. If I'm a firm leader right now, whether I have started my AI journey, whether I'm thinking about it, talking about it, I'm deep down, wherever I'm at in the process, what would be the kind of one takeaway you hope a firm leader would get from this discussion today?
Don't wait. Start now.
Start now and hire Edgefield Group. That's you
Well,
want to
not
try that one again?
Short, sweet.
you are not me. So
Yeah, that sponsorship. Waiting on that check could come through, so don't worry there. Ellen, thank you so much. We usually end these things with a terrible dad joke. Usually it's me, unfortunately, but I always love to throw it out to the guests. Do you have just a terrible dad or mom joke on standby here?
I was so engrossed in this conversation that I wasn't able to come up with one. But I believe in you, dog. So
Okay. Let's see. We've been doing a lot of like technology discussion, AI stuff. So, okay. Why did the computer get cold?
okay, why?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm asking you. Why did it get cold?
I don't know. Why did it get cold?
Matt,
What a
Emily,
virus.
any guesses?
What a virus.
Oh, I like that one.
Good guess, but you're wrong.
Had
It left the
bugs.
windows open.
Okay, I'm hanging
Come
up.
on.
I like mine better.
Come on now. It left the window. Oh, you guys are no fun. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us. I feel it's impressive. You found a way to make me feel even less intelligent. That I really have to do some more homework on some of this stuff here. So, very informative, very helpful, very exciting stuff here. And thank you for joining us. And we hope to have you back in the near future here to see some of the changes that actually implement inside firms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.